Chapter 4 is all about print media and the transitions that are happening in the industry due to the proliferation of the internet. We're going to talk about the rise of print media through the newspaper and its demise, and the magazine industry and their innovative history, and the book industry and its future in digital technology. So we're going to be talking a lot about the decline and the demise and deaths and within traditional media. And then I will have a couple of video links on the Schoology site so you can look at what's becoming of this industry and how it's going to be changing in the future. Newspapers first came on the scene during colonial times, and they were mostly weeklies that were just kind of stuck together by a printer, and there was no staff and no real format for them. And then when the steam-powered press came about and it was easier to print, dailies became common, and these reported on politics and the economy, and they were too expensive for the everyday guy, and they were usually distributed by mail. And then Benjamin Day was the first guy to kind of figure out that there was a mass market for newspapers. In 1833, he launched The Sun, a penny a copy paper with a focus on stories that interested the everyday Joe and was written in plain English. He created a format that caught on really quickly, and it was wildly successful, and this was just the beginning of advertising covering the cost for newspapers as well, and it was kind of the basis of our modern media system of advertising subsidizing that cost. So the cost of a penny only helped with production, and the wide audience really enticed advertisers, and then they subsidized the consumer cost by buying ad space, just like now. The success of the penny papers was made possible by the Industrial Revolution and the social and economic factors that resulted from the Industrial Revolution. Industrialization brought the steam-powered press, and urbanization, which was just that movement of people to the cities to work in all the new factories. And what happened because of this urbanization movement was that it caused a large group of really diverse people to be an audience for the papers. And then immigrants from poor parts of Europe used the penny papers to learn English because it had really unpretentious writing. The literacy was increasing at this time, and so many people were interested in reading papers. So you have all these factors coming into place to make it, the perfect storm for a newspaper to be widely distributed and profitable for the owners. So the success of the penny press format with reporting and editorial staffs and large revenue streams from advertising led to the structure of newspapers today, which include a news staff headed by an editor, a production staff of typesetters and technicians who understand the complex machinery and assemble the actual product, an advertising staff that works to sell advertisements to fund the paper, and a circulation department which works on building readership, attracting advertisers, and distributing the paper. And then the business staff, which covers bookkeeping, accountants, lawyers. So the format of the paper was another contribution to the success that it had. News, information, and entertainment, along with question columns, short stories, opinion pages, horoscopes, and comics, created a package that is accessible to a wide array of readers. And this structure has remained for 160 years, and it led to really long-running dominance of newspapers in the print and media world. For 300 years, newspapers flourished and helped make our democracy work by informing the public, and they promoted a more transparent government. Democracy was promoted by investigative reporting, with things like the Watergate scandal came to light because there was journalists out there watching the government, which of course led to Nixon's resignation from office. And the papers held a monopoly over this watchdog function, which made them necessary. And of course, this is changing now as the papers aren't as financially successful, and they choose not to put their money into investigative reporting like they used to. And the democratization of media through the internet and citizen journalism has really changed the playing field. So free expression was the newspaper's crusade, and their work really bled over to us, the citizens. And they've endured and fought on behalf of our rights for centuries. So without newspapers in our corner, there's a real question of who will champion the cause of free expression for us. A more transparent government was one of the effects of the newspaper industry on our society. They made it their business to look at documents, go to meetings, and generally listen in on government activities instead of allowing things to go on behind closed doors. So they have aggressively followed government activities and not allowed them to keep many secrets. Newspapers have also contributed commentary, criticism, and probed into social values in a way that have helped shape our culture as we know it. And they have also worked as incubators for a lot of great writers like Ernest Hemingway and Hunter S. Thompson, who spent some time as journalists before their success. Also, political leaders have come out of newspapers like Al Gore, among many others. So the industry, for all of its virtues, seems to be dying, along with other print publications due to the internet. Revenues dropped, there's been massive layoffs of staff, and some of the largest papers in the country are close to or have closed their doors for good. The first of the biggies to fall was the Denver newspaper, the Rocky Mountain News, in 2009. And then the Christian Science Monitor, after over 150 years of printing, switched to an online-only format to keep up with the changing landscape. And it seems that there's not much hope for the industry as a whole, but there's some bright spots. And many other publications have made changes in an attempt to save money, like trimming page sizes, dropping investigative reporting, downsizing staff. And right now, there's really a big shift at newspapers to combine offices, combine functions. So, like, they're moving all of their designers to one city, and then for several newspapers. It's kind of dire. It's not, newspapers are in decline, and there's not a lot we can do. But something else happens when things go out of style. Just like with photography, film photography is an art form. It's turning into an art form. So that's what happens when things go out of style. They become art. And though the market may be smaller for them, there's still a market. And like what is happening with the chemical process in photography, there's still a market for that, but it's just smaller. So I have a link to a video about what one guy did to help save the newspaper, and his name is Jack Utko, and he approached the newspaper as art, and he helped increase readership. So I have this link on the slide, and then I'll make sure that that link's available for you on Schoology. And I want you to keep in mind when you're watching the video that to be successful in media, especially now, you have to be thinking of where things can go with all the new tools available, not just what is ending or what's becoming endangered. To speak about the issues in the world is a really important role. It's a really important thing in democracy. And so I don't think newspapers can disappear, but they just might change format and they might become smaller. Magazines have also been declining in circulation numbers, but have traditionally been more innovative than the newspaper industry has. The newspaper industry is kind of stuck to the same basic format for many, many, many years, and magazines have went more openly to an online format, and they've used narrow audience segments and specialized content to attract specific audiences, which attracts advertisers. So while a narrow audience is outside of the purpose of a newspaper, it has served magazines really well. And in this time, this era of demassification that we live in, and subcultures that are so common today, magazines charge more for their publications, and they usually print less frequently. And they do more in-depth and special interest stories that draw their readers in. So they've transitioned to more outsourcing of staff to freelancers who work on a pay-by-piece basis. And they've also outsourced production and circulation, which seems to have helped them remain more viable than newspapers. So magazines have less overhead, smaller staffs, and usually a parent corporation standing behind them to help them navigate the tricky world of print in the age of the internet. So based on all these factors that help them survive better, the content of magazines has typically taken more risks. They print long-form journalism like commentary, essays, and fiction works, in-depth investigative reporting, and basically everything missing from the newspaper geared toward a specific audience. And they also do personality profiles on people of interest, which draws readership. One of the most lasting legacies of the magazine's history of innovation is photojournalism. During the Civil War, Harper's Weekly began running photographs of the battle, and since that time, this new genre, it took off with things like National Geographic, Life, on and on and on. And today, we can hardly pick up a magazine without noticing the rich visual content that's part of their signature. So while magazines are struggling as well, they are faring better in the digital age than newspapers are. And this is because of their innovative spirit that grew out of a similar but different business model that newspapers have really clung to for over a century. So the book industry is also struggling. The year that the big numbers dropped for everyone was 2008. And since then, many bookstores have closed. Layoffs have been more common, and online retailers took huge hits as well. But the book industry has an even more positive prognosis for recovery than other print media, because people are still reading, they're just using devices to do it, like ebooks and e-readers. So they're really in a good position to transition to the digital age. And the main difference in the business model for the book industry is that books do not rely on advertising to get readers. And they do not have huge overhead of printing presses. And they're not these all-encompassing, vertically integrated companies with this process like newspapers. So books are published through publishing houses, which is like a company with a brand name that produces books. And publishing companies do not have huge investments in printing of the books. Historically, they've contracted these services to companies that specialize in printing only. And the printing companies are the ones who absorb the cost of not printing books in the digital transition. So in this respect, book companies actually might save money by not printing books. Book companies don't rely on selling ad space to produce their product. They rely on book sales, and the widely accessible digital format lends themselves to this business model of just selling books. So the bookstores will absorb that cost of not selling physical books. And there's really no online equivalent outside of the book industry. So there's not much competition for selling and distributing books, and a lack of competition leads book companies to kind of have free reign over the market. Nobody knows really what's going to happen, or the size and the scope and the shape that the book industry is going to take after the whole transition. And there's going to be hazards and innovations, and I think there will emerge a really strong model that secures books as a viable media format. A lot of companies are consolidating and they're merging and acquiring one another. So one thing that seems certain is that there will probably not be many standalone companies in the future of books, but there will always be books. So the book industry has taken a lot of avenues to really remain viable, and these new directions, along with a simpler business model, have had their ups and downs, but it seems to be pulling them into the future, the whole industry. So one of the things that they do now is this idea of the blockbuster book, which was it's been around since 1852, with the first book that fit this description, Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe. And blockbuster books like Harry Potter and The Lightning Thief and The Hunger Games are always of interest to publishers. And some critics say that this leads to a single-minded pursuit of moneymakers, where important works kind of get trumped by popular taste. And Also, it's not always for sure that they're going to be a moneymaker. Blockbuster titles usually draw a huge amount of money up front for the author, and it's very risky for the publisher if the book flops. So many of the recent blockbuster books focus on young readers who are increasingly becoming illiterate, which means that they can read, but they choose not to. So this demographic has people that will purchase the books for them, and this is seen as a positive thing in society to engage this age group. And the effect of a single book being a bestseller is called the Harry Potter effect. And it's a trend that causes a swell in readership of this illiterate demographic. So a bunch of people that don't like to read suddenly start reading. Print on demand is just what it sounds like. Publishers don't stock the publication like they used to, and they even might just print the book when you order it. And it's an extreme example of, oh, and I'll put this video up for the Espresso book machine. So if you want to check that out, it's a print on demand technology. Technology has had a huge impact on the book industry, and it's not just devastated it like other forms of print media. Ebooks, digital books, paid for online are growing in popularity, and they cut the cost of printing. E-readers are on the rise and have further helped the cause of easily accessible books from the web. And it's made them easy to read with their screen technology, with like Kindle and their digital ink. And also audiobooks, CDs, you can download MP3s to listening devices. And when we're busy multitasking with all of our different types of media, we can listen to articles as podcasts, and it's just, it's a lot more accessible. So I will put these links up for Push Pop Press, which is a new interactive book that, it's a software that creates interactive books that a company is putting together, and then the print-on-demand Espresso book machine. So the public domain is when a creative work or a piece of intellectual property comes to a point where there is no one that owns the rights. So this is true of like Greek classics by Aristotle, or items that the copyright has just run out on. So when no copyright can be claimed, a work is said to belong to the public as a whole. And typically a copyright expires 70 years after the death of the author. Or in the case of Aristotle, there was never a copyright because there was no law to enforce it. So there are groups who are preserving these classic titles in the digital age, like adding free titles to Kindle and other lists for free or for a very low fee. Project Gutenberg was pioneered by Michael Hart, and this was the first online library or digital library that digitized and disseminated cultural classic works. They use volunteers mainly to get the public domain works into the hands of the public by scanning and keyboarding them into a digital format and making them universally available. We talked about the Google Print Library before. They set out to digitize the library collections of Harvard, Oxford, Stanford, and the University of Michigan, and the New York Public Library. And they were attempting to digitize and catalog all the books in the English language, but then they ran into some trouble with copyright issues and were unable to freely give this information away. So here are some discussion questions that we might go over in class. What are the effects of the transition to digital media on democracy? And what is the value of the old way of doing things as an art form? Thanks for listening, and I will see you in class.